Hello and welcome to our next edition of My Bibles. We are looking at a firm favourite, an oldie but a goodie. Today we're doing the New King James Version. So I'm just going to put a little caveat here. I will probably not be reviewing the King James Version. I do own King James Version Bibles, but they are very old and probably called artifacts now, to be fair. They are keepsake Bibles that I've had that was given to me as, you know, a tiny little girl. So I will probably not be doing this because it's Bibles that I use, that I have on my shelf, or that I'm working my way through in some way, say for Bible journaling. So I probably won't. So this is the closest you're going to get to a King James review. For those of you who are King James fans. So without further ado, we are looking at the New King James Version. This is brought to you by Thomas Nelson. Thomas Nelson published the King James and the New King James Version. Of course, the King James Version is the oldest, most well-known, one of the oldest, most well-known versions of the Bible, and comes out in 1611. And this is something I didn't know, and I'm not reviewing the King James, but I thought it was quite interesting. So 1611 is when it's first published, and it continues to have updates until 1769. So like 150 years, they continue to update the language, they continue to keep pace, and then they stop. I found that quite interesting. I would really I was quite curious as to why, and I really wanted to dig into that, but it's not a review of the King James, so I decided not to, just to let that stand. But I think it gives food for thought about the fact that they were updating the language and they were keeping it current to the people and making it more understandable and, you know, moving, because the original, if anyone's ever read the original, they will not be able to understand it. It's written in very old English dialect, and so it's not even like the King James can be very not understandable. It has that element to it, but the original King James is a totally different language. Even, you know, British scholars would struggle, I think, in some ways. So in 1975, the process began to update, to look at how do we actually bring this now to a modern audience. So that's like a few hundred years, two and some change years, they began to do this. And there is basically 130 people on the team. They have Greek, Hebrew, English scholars, editors, church leaders, the full gamut of people. And in 1979, the first New Testament is published. 80 you have the Psalms, and then in 82 the whole Bible was revised and released. And so they have this kind of structural thing. What I found quite interesting is I had a misconception about the New King James, to be honest. I really felt like it just changed the language and left the translation pretty much as is. Turns out I wasn't right. What they did is they did want to give this idea that the King James has this kind of air of authority, and they wanted to keep that, but they wanted the accuracy, and this is really important. They wanted the rhythm and the beauty and the clarity and understanding to remain. And so they have their primary function for translation. As you know, every translation committee sets its primary goals, and the New King James would suit me down to a T, I guess, in some ways. No, I think it's quite an interesting one. So they have three. The first is that it had to be beautiful, which, when talking about language, I find that to be quite interesting, because there is a rhythm and a beauty to the original languages that it's written in. There's lots of poetry, there's lots of beauty to the nature of the rhymes that happen within the Hebrew, particularly, but also there are plays on words and things that happen naturally within language. And so this idea that one of the primary translation functions is to keep it beautiful, to maintain the sound of the language, to maintain the rhythm of the language. And it made me wonder if that's a reason that the New King James is as popular as it is, because it gives the reader this audible element that maybe some other translations and I haven't got to some of those, which are more clunky, I feel, in their pursuit of accuracy, they lose the beauty of the language. And, you know, the Bible was meant to be handed down. It was meant to be spoken about. It's meant to be orally delivered. And so when you're thinking about how does it sound when someone hears it, it's almost as if you're going back to some of the original language ideas around it. So I thought that was quite interesting. The second being that it should be trustworthy, in that the translation was made from traditional Hebrew, Aramaic and Greek text, and they wanted it to have this, you can trust us that this is a good rendering of the text. And the methodology they use is called complete equivalence. I think you've heard me say this in other videos, but basically that's their translation method, and they're trying to get the word for word, but beyond that, because they're encompassing the beauty, to get the real understanding. So it's this tension, as I've told you, there's this real tension within translations between word for word and thought for thought. And complete equivalency is saying the word for word is important, but when language doesn't work in that way, when you're translating, and I am bilingual-ish, when you're translating a sentence from, say, English to Dutch or Dutch to English, there are words that we don't have. So there is, that is an issue. So in Dutch, there are words that the English language just doesn't have. And therefore, you are coming up with an equivalent sentiment that brings across the point. And anyone who speaks multiple languages, really, I find it hard to believe that anyone who speaks multiple languages is going to die on a hill of a particular Bible translation, because you should really get the point that translation is dynamic, and complete equivalency seeks to look at this dynamism. And then so you have beautiful, you have trustworthy, and then you have today. They wanted it to be modern. And so they didn't want to die on the hill of stopping doing the translation after 150 years. They want this to be ongoing. They want it to be ongoing, that there are translations. And so it's modern. They set the reading level surprisingly to an 8th grader, which, if I remember correctly, is about a 12, 13-year-old. I thought that was quite interesting. I think when I've read the King James, and I have read it as a young person, maybe not 12, 13, it wasn't around then. Give away your age much. But when I read it, did I think it was applicable to teenagers? I don't know. I think that's a hard one. I think, you know, any Bible is going to be challenging for teenagers. You're doing the best that you can to render it in the language that is at least academically possible and accessible to them. Because, of course, language, now, again, giving away your age, there will be things that we said as teenagers that the next generation of teenagers don't say, that they don't think is cool or appropriate, or however you want to use that terminology. So it's quite interesting that, of course, the reading level is slightly different from the usability of language, but that kind of academic rigor of a 13-year-old. So if you've got to English at a 13-year-old level and you're reading English literature, language, poetry, etc., you should be able to grasp the rhythm and the words and the language that's being used in the translation for the New King James. So I thought it was quite good. It's not denominational, as with most translations. Very few of them are actually denominational. There are some. I don't tend to own any of those translations. I don't tend to read any of those translations or use any of them, because they are specific to their denomination generally. And so not being part of their denomination and being on the outside, you tend not to use their translations. And that's not to say there's something wrong, but it's just a reality, a function of Christianity. We tend to use what the more widely available. And their aim was to hit all English speakers. So I've spoken about this before, with the tension between American English and British English. And there is a real tension there, and I prefer to read Bibles that are in the British English spectrum, because I can understand them a little bit easier, and I find that they're more appropriate to the academic level in which I've lived and worked. And there are differences in the rhythm of the language between an American English and a British English. And for those people who work with colleagues internationally like I do, you will find that if people have learnt English through the TV, there are two categories: British English TV listeners and American English. And according to how they've learnt it, will depend on the words that you hear. Like, you know, we refer to so many things with the same words, but they come out very differently. Or the same things with different words, and it really does sound differently. So, but this one decided to go with a more neutral position. I think it was trying to aim at all English speakers. So there's kind of a baseline of looking at it from a 13-year-old perspective, learning English. There's this kind of universal element to it, so that readers of the New King James who are maybe English as a second language can also grasp it, and not to Americanize it or to Britishize it, anglicize it, remember the word, too much, so that you actually can make it as neutral as possible. So I thought that was really helpful to understand. I mean, I've never had a problem accessing the New King James, but I am English, is my mother tongue, and of course I'm British English, so that would explain that really. So the usability aspect of it, I would say that I've been using the New King James probably since some of the more popular, not just the translation was available, but actually some of the more popular uses of the translation. So there was the Extreme Teen Bible, which I'm going to share with you today. So this is one of the Bibles we're going to look at, is Extreme Teen Bible, and I've had that since it was released. We won't discuss when, I guess. But I find, to be honest, if you grew up in a household that is a Christian household, or that has any Christian overtures, and so you know the Lord's Prayer, or the 23rd Psalm by heart, or you've heard the rhythm of the language of the King James, you grew up in kind of that sort of household, that the New King James is a great way in to looking at translation, and to look at the Bible in a modern language. It's not too difficult. It's quite understandable. There are terminology that's very biblical specific, so it's not really trying to be for the everyday person in that way. They do have, you know, the usual terms that you would expect, but once you kind of get a frame of reference, if you've grown up in any sort of religious background at all, actually, and that could be any discipline, I think it becomes quite easy to read. So my experience has been, it's a great kind of way into that world of studying. I'm no fan of the original King James, to be fair. I'm not going to die on the hill of King James is the only Bible. That will not be me. And for those of you who watch this know that I tend to read a variety of Bibles, and I have a wide collection, because I find that when you study, you really need to dig into, especially if time is against you and you don't have time to do your Hebrew and Greek lessons. Reading a wide selection of Bibles gives you some idea that the words can be translated in different ways and have different meanings, and those slight variations or slight inflections can give you this deeper, richer colour to the scripture that helps you to bring it across. I was going to say exposit, but let me use a phrase instead, to bring it across to people in a way that's clearer. So that's from my teaching perspective, of course. I've been teaching out of the New King James since my teens, actually, because I have the Extreme Teen Bible. So it was my first Bible into the world of not just having a Bible with just the biblical words, but that there was other things that you could have within the biblical narrative. Like there was commentary and encouragement, and there's different styles. So for me, this was, and I love it, it's reminiscent of those times. And so I think I will always have a soft spot for the New King James Bible in that way. But I'm going to introduce you to two, because I only have two of my Bibles. So we're going to do that now, and I'm just going to take you through the Extreme Teen and the Life Application large print study Bible, so this should be fun. Okay, so as you can see, I have my Bibles with me. I have the Extreme Teen Bible. That was the original New King James version that I have. This one is very beloved. Of course, it comes in my favourite colour, so that would have helped me at the time. And then I have a newer one that I'm going to share with you, which is the Life Application Study Bible in large print. So I wanted to actually share this one with you because I didn't get a chance to do that on the NLT review that we did. So check the link. Check the page for that. So this is the Extreme Teen version. It's obviously written with, it's how would we say, it's dated for what you see now, so you can see that the way that the titles and headers are written, it uses particular fonts we probably don't use anymore, but they were quite relevant at the time that this was created. It then has lots of highlights to help you look at like what it means, what is meant by certain things in the text. There were a number of pages. Let me see if I can find some of those pages. Every so often you have this. So these stories that would come up on how the main characters are making a difference, what you can do too, how it furthers your relationship, so challenging. And you can see, okay, so this might look a little bit out of date to what you think teenagers would look like today, but I loved it at the time that I had it, obviously. And I've used this for Bible studies. It gives a great introduction to the text. It gives a great overview, has a great purpose. Really just quite usable for a teenager who's starting to lead her own Bible studies. You know, if you have a teen who's starting to lead their own Bible studies, who's starting to go into that foray, I think Extreme Teen has had a makeover and has many different versions of it now, but it's a really good staple Bible, I feel like, because it gives you key words and ideas and themes that you can follow. Like this one is on repentance, and this will come up again and again, and you can follow it. And it has the reading plans and concordance at the back here. Let me see. I think it was at the back. It might have been at the front. So no, this is just the reading plan at the back. So you can do which of your reading plans. Maybe it was at the front, actually. So I remember it. It's been a while since I've used it. I haven't been doing Bible studies out of this. Right, so here. So you've got like key ideas like sin, and then you can look up all of these texts surrounding sin and build kind of an idea for yourself, asking these questions and others once you've read the text, of course. And so it's nice if you have a teenager who's beginning to lead in their Bible studies and have their own group of studying. This is a great, I think, one, because it gives them the right kind of information, and it just gives them a foundation that they can look for themselves. As you can tell, I've been teaching Bible studies since I was a teenager, so I believe that other teenagers are doing this too. Maybe they're not, but I think it's a great, I would encourage, or I do encourage my young people to actually lead Bible studies. I think it's the best way to learn the Bible yourself, to learn about God, to become passionate about it, and to be able to share your love, is to have your own group of friends who sit down and you read the Bible together and you figure it out for yourselves and you plan your lessons and you get into it. And this was what I used way back when. So there'll be people who maybe will watch this who knew me a while ago, will say, I know that Bible, I remember that. So that's the Extreme Teen. Now, if you have watched the NLT review, so the New Living Translation review, you will have seen my very precious old Life Application Bible. And I told you that I absolutely loved it and I really wanted another one. Well, there was a sale, and because the box was quite battered and quite worn, I was able to get it for a very, very low price. If I tell you how low, you might be jealous, so I won't tell you. The box is completely battered. So they sold it for a ridiculously low price. Unfortunately, it was because some of the shops that the company owned was out of business now. And they were going fully online, so they were trying to get rid of all of the stock they had in the stores, of course, because when you send something online. So this is a brand new Bible. I haven't even had a chance to have it as my Bible of the year yet. I think this is going to be my Bible of the year next year, to be honest, because as I told you, I'm still with the CEB and I still feel like I haven't read enough of it. I'm still trying to really immerse myself in it. So while I do get this out from time to time, it's not going to be my Bible of the year this year. It will probably be next year. Look how big the lovely letters are. If you have someone in your life who is obsessed with the Bible, encourage them to get big letters and single columns. It's like the best gift you can give anyone. I absolutely love single columns and big letters. And I'm not old enough to require reading glasses or anything like that. I just really like the clarity, because to be honest, like if I pull a novel off my shelf, so let me see if I can do that just off the cuff. I've got a book here. You know, people will look and say, oh, it's a bad thing. But look at this. It's equivalent to reading a normal book. You know, this is the equivalent to picking up a book and reading a book. Having the letters the right size. So while people often say, oh, I don't know, you should feel some kind of way. People say, old people read large print. I actually think it should just say normal size on the packet. Like, this is normal size letters. The Bible print is just teeny tiny. And I have Bibles that are like this big. So you can imagine how small those words are. But I love what we term large print, which is just normal size letters. So you'll see in the life application that half the page, or sometimes less, sometimes more, is dedicated to the commentary. And then in the margins, they have the references. So you then have the cross-referencing in the margin, which is really helpful. I like the way this is laid out because of the kind of really emphasis on the single column, but that your studying aspects are still there on the side. So I love this one. I haven't, as I say, I haven't used it as much, but I'm in love with it because I have had a life application Bible since I went to university. So you get a sense of how it is. I'm taking you back to the beginning because this is the great thing about a life application. It gives you the timelines, it gives you vital statistics, it gives you clear information about the text, and it's detailed. It doesn't just drop you off. It's got all the mega themes and some rough explanations. And you may disagree with these. You know, you may read this, and if you've got more knowledge, say, oh, I wish they'd written it like this or like this. But they really are trying to be non-denominational and catch that what is a Christian ground. Like, let's catch, what does it mean to be a Christian? Let's meet in that place. And all of your divergences and differences, okay, that's good for you, but let's try and meet in the critical point of what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus, of a Jewish Messiah, of, you know, and having that experience of understanding that world. And that, I think that's really important. So I like the way it's laid out. I like the clarity of it. I will read a bit of it. I'm not going to read. Do you want me to read Matthew chapter 1 so you get a sense of how the Old English? I feel like I should read, you know, Psalms 23. Let's see if we can get to Psalms 23. How about that? Because Psalms 23 is the one that most people will know in the oops, bit my cardigan there. In the King James. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures, so on and so forth. So let's see how the New King James, with its lyrical emphasis, works. Let's just read Psalm 23 and let's see how it works. So Psalm 23, a Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So you hear the lyric. I think you can hear the lyrical content. I think you can hear that it's trying to keep, because it's such a famous chapter, it's trying to keep the King James in mind, and how that works. So with the yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, yea is not something we would say in modern English, but it keeps it because it's giving that lyrical content to the language, and I think within that context it works. So I think you get an idea of what they're trying to aim for when they talk about it's got to be beautiful and that it's got to be understandable. I think, you know, in today's language, I think you get a real sense of that from Psalms 23. So this is my review. I can do a full review of the life application if you want one day. Please do let me know in the comments. This is my, can you believe I got this really beautiful book? If I ever told you how much I paid for it, it was very reasonable. I still look at it and absolutely love it. I can't believe the bargain I got and how happy I am with it. It is enormous, so be prepared that if you're getting a large print, or in my terms a normal print size, it's going to be enormous, because the Bible is not one book, it's 66 books in one, and that is something that we need to remember. So I really hope that you enjoyed the New King James video for today. I'm going to come back and look at you so I can make a little final comment. So what would I like you to have got out of this? If you are new to the reviews, you know that my main purpose is to look at the usability and look at the positive aspects of the biblical translations and look at how we can use them in modern times. But with the New King James, I think I have in my mind that the fight in the what is the authoritative version of the Bible continues on today. And the New King James proves to us that you can actually modernize the language, that you can actually take a beloved text, that you can actually still have beautiful sounding lyrical content, but that has the deep theological resonance with the translation from the Hebrew, the Aramaic and the Greek. And that it's important to always read a variety of texts. If you want to dig in deep, if you have the desire to really understand these 66 books or more, depending on the Bible that you have, that it's important that you actually do read widely. And that you read more than one, and that you begin to read historical books about the time, that you give reverence and respect to the fact that this was written within a culture and to a people and to a specific group, and that it had ramifications outside of that group, but that it wasn't just written as a love letter to Tabitha in the 21st century, but that it was written to its people and its time. And so I think that it's really important to give respect to the biblical ninjas. My favorite description of authors comes from Tim Mackey, who talks about them being Bible ninjas, the way that they master the scripture, the way that they make the links, the way that the story narrative builds is so important. And I think the King James and the New King James gives you this idea that it's not a static, still, stopped, dead book. It's something that lives and breathes and has legs. And for other religions, other groups, sometimes they don't understand. We haven't, as Christians, explained that very well. So they feel like we're heretical for having so many different translations, when in fact it's about, really, the Bible is the living word. It's supposed to have the emphasis on the people understanding who God is, and it's his love letter to humanity. So I think it's really important for us to really encapsulate that and have the respect and reverence for that when we're reading. And of course, if you live a lifetime as a Christian, very long time, if you have the opportunity to study the Greek and the Hebrew and the Aramaic, please do it. It adds so much colour and depth, being able to actually read the words in their own way. It's like, you know what it's like? It's like moving to a country as an English speaker, because you'll watch me in English, and refusing to learn the people's language, but wanting to have friends. Those people will always be speaking to you in your comfort zone, and they will always be uncomfortable. But you will never ever fully understand them, because you are not putting yourselves into their space and being uncomfortable with them. And so I think it really is, it's important to remember that the biblical authors wrote in Hebrew, Aramaic and Greek to their people in their time. And that's not to make, that wasn't for us to be comfortable. The English reading of it is not rendering it for us to be comfortable. But there comes a point when you have to be uncomfortable and step into their world with reverence and respect and understand what's happening. Just as you would if you moved to another country and instead of just putting yourself in an English-speaking enclave, you wanted to understand the people and be real true friends and have form relationships, then you would need to learn about their culture, learn about their traditions, learn about their holidays, learn their language. And I think that's something that Christians have a long way to go to really translating that to other people. So that's my review for today on the New King James Version. I hope that you've enjoyed your time with us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for watching. Please share this if it's meant something to you. If it encourages someone in their Bible reading journey, please do feel free to share it. All right, God bless. Peace. Bye-bye.